Decision 2008 coverage is next on WMFE's This Week. First, a taxing issue centering on your home. Is a yes vote or a no vote on Florida's property tax amendment best for you and your community? We'll weigh both sides. Then answering the tough questions. The candidates for Orlando mayor sound off on the future of the city beautiful. Plus, rallying troops in Central Florida. The fight advocates are planning against the so-called Marriage Protection Amendment and the Trouble Amendment supporters are now facing. That's next on WMFE's This Week. In-depth news about our Central Florida community. Central Floridians are already voting on a controversial property tax issue. But are they really aware of the potential impacts on the community? Hello, I'm Jerry Eisinger. On this program, we'll break down the property tax amendment so you can make an informed decision come January 29th. Here's what's at stake. If the amendment passes, homeowners stand to save an average of $240 a year in property taxes because of an increased homestead exemption. That relatively small amount quickly adds up for local government, though. Statewide, cities and counties expect to lose more than $9 billion in revenue over the next 5 years. Already, government leaders are threatening cuts in services and added fees. And as WMFE's Brittany Shane reports, this leaves voters with a critical decision.
Family man Jim Lawton owns his own home in the Lake Nona area of Orange County and says he's all for the proposed property tax cut.
All right.
There are two things that I think are the best part. First, the reduction in taxes, I'm always in favor of that, and the portability of the homestead exemption. I encourage that, and I think that that's a smart idea because what it does is it does not penalize you from buying a new home, and that's important.
Amendment 1, as the proposed change is also known, has 4 major components. The first is homestead exemption. This would go up if the amendment passes. That would mean $50,000 worth of your primary home's value would be protected from property taxes, double the current amount. Lawton estimates he'll save $300 to $400 a year on his property taxes if the amendment passes.
Good news for homeowners of the state of Florida is that we're going to get some property tax relief based on this new amendment, as well as being able to transport our homestead exemption from home to home.
If Lawton moves, his tax savings would go with him under the new proposal. The portability of the Save Our Homes benefit is the second major feature of the proposed change. Save Our Homes currently helps people who've lived in the same house for a long time. No matter how much property values actually rise, it stops local governments from raising taxes more than 3% a year. If passed, the new amendment would allow property owners to transfer up to $500,000 of savings they've built up over the years when they move. This wouldn't help relatively new homeowners or those who've recently moved. Not that Jim Lawton plans on moving anytime soon.
It's not going to, make me want to go out and buy, $1 million home either.
Voters will be seeing ballots like this for a proposed property tax cut on January 29th. Early voting has already started, but many people that we've spoken with are confused as to what this amendment actually is or how it'll affect them and their community. Especially when it comes to those who don't own a home. People like Maitland resident Harcourt Harris.
I haven't paid much attention to it not being a homeowner.
Harris might not directly benefit, but his landlord might. And that's the third part of the proposed amendment, a 10% cap on property assessments for non-homestead properties. This would mean property taxes on investment homes and commercial properties would also be capped to a maximum increase of 10% a year regardless of the property's value. The fourth part of the amendment targets business owners. It would create a $25,000 tax exemption on things like computers and other business equipment. Overall, it's a big tax cut, but some Central Floridians wonder if a yes vote is really the right thing to do. Renters like Jen Kranz and Harcourt Harris say they're worried that tax cuts they may not benefit from could mean cuts in services they depend on.
But in the long term, I think it could affect me because the government's receiving less taxes. Therefore, the schools are getting less, the firefighters are getting less, and everybody who supports me is getting less. So they're saying that they might charge a surcharge, and so in the long term, that obviously will affect me.
That would not be good, you see, because if we had a surcharge on all these services like library, police, fire protection, EMS, etc., that would cut into our net income, and that wouldn't be good.
On the flip side, experts like Mark Johnston, a marketing professor from Rollins College, say the property tax cut may boost Central Florida's sagging real estate market.
Essentially what it's going to do is say to people that own a home, particularly if they've owned a home for a long time and their property taxes are low, it's going to say to them, look, you can take those low property taxes and you can take those with you to a new property. So it encourages them to perhaps look at buying a new home.
It's quick fix, I think. I think in the long term, no one's going to be happy with it.
And why do you think that is?
Because of the surcharges. Because the extra fees that we're going to end up paying, that should be coming out of the taxes to begin with, to support the schools and the fire and the police departments and the libraries and whatever else.
And experts say local governments will lose out from the tax cut in a big way.
It's a little bit difficult to come up with one figure, but clearly we're talking in the billions of dollars if you look at it spread out over several years.
Some organizations like the League of Women's Voters are estimating that cities and counties statewide will lose $9.6 billion over the next 5 years if the amendment passes. But some residents think it will help control local government spending.
I think that anytime you're given a certain amount of money and you're told that you're going to get less of that money, there is some whimpering and crying, as it were. I believe that services will still continue to be gone. I think that as in my own home, I'm going to have to be leaner and meaner, and I think that's what we're going to have to require of our local municipalities.
Critics say the changes could penalize residents in the long run. Supporters say it's relief for homeowners and a boost to the economy. Jim Lawton thinks the real effects will be a mix of both extremes.
Do I think that it's going to revitalize or revamp the entire real estate marketplace in Florida? I don't think so. On the other hand, do I think that by reducing the property taxes by $400 or an average of $300 throughout the state of Florida, do I think that that's going to cause a collapse in the infrastructure of the local municipalities? I don't think so. So it's somewhere in between.
Whether you own a home or not, if the amendment passes, it will affect everyone in Central Florida. For WMFE's This Week, I'm Brittany Shane.
To pass, the amendment requires 60% voter approval. So far, polls released to the public show the approval numbers aren't quite there yet. For more on the overall economic impact of the proposed tax cut, we turn now to Dr. Sean Snaith. He's been tracking the financial implications of the proposed tax cuts for quite a while now. Nice to see you, sir.
Nice to be here.
Let's begin with some numbers. The government in Orange County is bracing for a possible $42 million budget cut this year alone, should the amendment pass. For government in Seminole County, the number's closer to $30 million. And representatives from other counties say they have no idea what the financial impact will be. So is this a budget hit that our local governments can even withstand?
Well, it's hard to know exactly what the impact is going to be, particularly with the portability component, because that could lead to shuffling between tax districts, between counties, that has an impact that no one really could know. The challenge also is it's coming in an environment where the markets are doing something to adjust property taxes downward. We've got a large surplus in the housing sector, and that's pushing prices down, so that's going to drive down revenues for local government as well at the same time.
Mm-hmm. This complicated equation that we're going to be voting on, what's the response you've been getting from anyone that you've talked to about this? Is it too complicated to be on one ballot?
There's that aspect of it, and then there's just the people aren't sure if it's the right thing to do. Everybody feels that we need to do something about property taxes with the way they've been going with real estate markets. But there's also this fear that it may impact them on areas where there is a concern in terms of public safety. I mean, crime has been an ongoing issue in the region, and people are uncomfortable, I think, with the thought that we would have less law enforcement on the streets at this particular time. So there is an ambiguity. You mentioned the poll numbers not showing that we're at the necessary mark to pass the amendment. Mm-hmm. And I think those polls sort of reflect this uncertainty, that people don't know if this is the solution to a problem that needs to be addressed, property taxes, but probably that it's a tip of a bigger problem, tip of the iceberg of the tax structure in Florida, how we fund state and local government, how can we do it in an equitable manner that doesn't jeopardize underfund the essential services we need government to provide.
And also, how can we get out of the current housing slump? If
That's
this were
right.
to pass, if this amendment passes, do you see that happening?
Unfortunately, no. I wish it were a panacea for the situation in the housing markets. The problems there are more fundamental. It's an excess supply. It is the aftermath of an incredible several-year housing boom. There are bigger problems. Financial markets, credit markets are in some turmoil. This is a component of it. Property taxes are a component of it. And while I think it would boost some transactions in terms of the real estate market, it may enable some people to downsize or upsize that have been sort of kept on the sideline because of higher property taxes. Those people, when they move, are going to leave a vacant house as well. So
when they move from their old house to a new house, that's not going to change the inventory situation.
That's right. I mean, it does create some transactions in the real estate market and does enable some people who are saying that they're trapped in their house because of fear of the higher property taxes that a new purchase would entail. But the bigger problem isn't necessarily solved with this. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of it's just going to be the old adage that time heals all wounds.
Dr. Sean Snaith, we thank you very much for your time, sir. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Coming up next, a setback for supporters of an effort aimed at strengthening Florida's ban on same-sex marriage. And next, the race for Orlando mayor. Does challenger Ken Mulvaney really stand a chance against incumbent Buddy Dyer? This week's Decision 2008 coverage continues now with the race for Orlando mayor. Orlando businessman Ken Mulvaney is again challenging Buddy Dyer for his current seat at City Hall. WMFE 90.7's Judith Smelser has more on Mulvaney's long-standing battle with Dyer.
Local businessman and second-time mayoral candidate Ken Mulvaney lost the 2004 mayor's race to incumbent Buddy Dyer. Following that vote, Mulvaney accused Dyer of election fraud in a civil lawsuit. That led to a criminal investigation that ended with Mayor Dyer being suspended from office for 40 days. The criminal charges were later dropped, but the rivalry is still alive. Mulvaney is back this year, once again challenging the incumbent. Mulvaney has pursued many successful business ventures, and now he hopes to carry his passion for the business world into the political sphere. Mulvaney is focusing on several key issues, including crime, taxes, and the bidding process for downtown development contracts. For WMFE's This Week, I'm Judith Smelser.
We'll talk to Buddy Dyer in just a few minutes, but first, Ken Mulvaney joins us. Thank you very much for coming. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Recently, you have criticized Mayor Dyer for his public safety record, and he has responded saying, we want to see your plan.
Well, we've been working on a couple of issues. One of the issues, which I think we all agree, is to put more police officers out on the street. Another issue I've been looking into is the city of Orlando is divided up into 4 sectors. And I think by redividing it again into 8 sectors, we can get a better response time from the cops.
Where would you anticipate the money to come from for more police on the streets?
For more police on the streets, we would look at straight away going into the city, and I'm sure there's a lot of areas in the city where we can do some budget cuts and take that money and put it out in our public safety areas.
Which areas would you anticipate the money to come from?
Till you actually got in and looked at where the city is at in spending in different departments. The first department I would look at is the mayor's department, which that particular budget, I think when the mayor came into office 4 or 5 years ago, was $10 million. Today it's $17 million.
And now Orlando has a track record, the voters have a track record of re-electing the incumbent. Why run a second time?
In any race or any political race you look at, when you look at opponents, when they say about an incumbent being re-elected, there's always a chance where the incumbent doesn't get re-elected. And I think the citizens of Orlando are looking for change this time round.
And there is a different aspect this time. In 2004, you had 5 candidates running. This time, it's just the mayor and yourself. Is that an advantage for you?
It can be perceived as an advantage or disadvantage. I look at the advantage is that there's going to be no runoff in this race. The only thing with this campaign, as opposed to the last campaign, the disadvantage is the campaign was brought forward earlier, the election, the 29th of January, instead of in March, which means there's actually not as much time to campaign on this particular race.
What about development as well? You see buildings going up all the time. We see a lot of development happening here. Where do you stand on all the development that's currently happening?
I believe in development 100%, as long as the development brings needed jobs into the area. But I don't believe in overdevelopment, and I believe we do need to plan as we go forward, make sure we do not overbuild.
Should developers have incentives to continue?
I don't believe developers should have incentives, as we've seen downtown over the last couple of years, especially with some of the bigger projects which have been put into play, have problems right now, and they've been incentives from the City of Orlando, which I believe the city is not going to recoup some of them incentives back.
What in your campaign would you like to have spotlighted or receive more emphasis or attention? The word you're getting out, what is the message?
The word I'm getting, I'd like people to look at me too, is my #1 issue is going to be combating crime in Orlando. I will take a hands-on position on fighting the crime issue. Issue number 2 would be the issue of property taxes and getting property taxes lowered and not increased. And number 3, open government and giving the citizens of Orlando a better say in what way our city is being run.
Ken Mulvaney, thank you very much for your time. We do appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me here. Thank you.
Now to incumbent Mayor Dyer. He's had some ups and downs during his tenure. WMFE's 90.7 Judith Smelser reports.
After 5 years of service as the City of Orlando's mayor, Buddy Dyer is up for re-election January 29th. Dyer has focused many of his efforts on revitalizing downtown, and he's credited with winning approval for 3 entertainment and sports venues there. The mayor says the project will mean big bucks for the city, but some residents say the money for the multi-million-dollar facilities could have been better spent elsewhere. Early in his tenure, Mayor Dyer promised to rejuvenate the high-crime neighborhood of Paramore. He secured tens of millions of dollars of investment into the area, and he asked residents to judge him by what he's accomplished there. Dyer also presided over a record-breaking crime wave in Orlando. He responded with a new focus on public safety, and he started on a plan to hire 75 new police officers and 45 new fire personnel. Voters will have a chance to judge Dyer's performance as mayor when they go to the polls later this month. For WMFE's This Week, I'm Judith Smelser.
Mayor Buddy Dyer is with us now. Thanks very much for your time, sir. Good to see you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
We talk a lot about public safety in this campaign, and I know you brought a lot of attention to the issue yourself. I was just wondering, when people point to the crime surge and say that's something that happened during your time in office, how do you respond to those critics?
Well, one of the things, we have devoted more money, more resources, more police officers on the street, so we haven't taken this sitting down at all, and we knew that there was a national trend, that there was an increase in violent crime, so we acted many years ago to start a 3-year public safety initiative where we're adding 75 additional officers, new training facilities, new cars, new equipment for the police officers, different operations. We're borrowing from other cities in terms of attacking crime very proactively.
What about the area of Paramore? What tangible changes have we seen in the Paramore area?
Well, we've had great success in Paramore. There's still more to do. I'm not suggesting we're all finished in Paramore, but we launched the Pathways for Paramore program several years ago that has 5 pathways: home ownership, public safety, economic development, quality of life, and children education. We've made good progress on each one of those. New housing growing up in Paramore. Paramore had the least percentage of home ownership of anywhere in the city. And if you're going to have a good, sustainable neighborhood where the residents take pride, you got to have a high level of home ownership. So we're working on those programs. We've got a merchants association for the first time ever in Paramore, and we've opened new businesses there just about every month. We've had a ribbon cutting of some sort. We launched Operation Delta in Paramore, which brought some of our most aggressive police officers there, and we made over 800 arrests in a little over 2 months. And what we found is it wasn't the residents of Paramore that were committing crimes in Paramore. It's people driving in from all over the region, and we want the residents of Paramore to be able to reclaim their neighborhood and tell them we won't put up with that here in our neighborhood.
There's so much development happening right now. Wondering if you believe that developers should have incentives.
Well, the incentives that we have provided are rebates on their increasing property value. So let's say there was a vacant piece of property, and what we've incentivized is residential. And what we've said is, okay, you've got a piece of property that's worth $100. You make a big investment, now it's worth $1 million. We're going to give you a little bit of rebate on the property taxes that you'd pay in the excess. So,
and this is the category you've received some criticism from your opponent, Ken Mulvaney, who's talked about that there shouldn't be that kind of incentives going on for developers, especially when it comes to condos. thinking that we were building too many condos, and now are we in a bad situation?
Not at all. We've got a little downturn in the home buying market, but 5 years ago, before we were here, there wasn't any residential. We wouldn't even be talking about whether it's affecting downtown or not. When I got here 5 years ago, we looked at our downtown and people referred to it as blighted. I'm very proud of what we've accomplished in just 5 years to turn our downtown
We're still
around.
seeing some of the buildings today that are they sitting empty or with very low occupancy?
Well, the condo market, certainly there's at capacity, let's just say that. But if you can buy them for a little bit cheaper, that's probably good for the folks that want to live downtown.
And making headlines right now is 55 West in foreclosure. How are you responding?
Well, it's not always the first developer that makes a successful project, but that will end up being a very successful project for the town.
But some would argue, though, that the incentive itself was not the best investment of taxpayer dollars.
Again, they only receive the incentive based on the increase in property value. So it's really an investment for the city. We keep 80 to 90% of that increase in value and give them a little bit of a rebate, a little bit of a break on their property tax increase.
Mayor Buddy Dyer, great to see you. Thank you so much for your time, sir. We do appreciate it. And coming up next, a mounting campaign. How this Orlando event plays into the larger effort to stop a proposed amendment dubbed the Anti-Gay Marriage Amendment. This week, the State Division of Elections announced a setback for an Orlando-based group that's trying to strengthen Florida's ban on gay marriage through an amendment to the state constitution. The state said the Florida Coalition to Protect Marriage does not yet have enough signatures on its petition to force the issue onto the November ballot. The group has until February 1st to collect an additional 20,000 signatures. Meantime, a national advocacy group is already mobilizing volunteers in Orlando to oppose the proposed amendment. Leaders for the Human Rights Campaign gathered at a downtown restaurant this week. They focused on the strategies they could use to defeat the proposed amendment if the measure appears on November's ballot. This week's Orlando event was the first in a series of statewide workshops. For more on this, we turn now to Orlando lawyer John Morgan. He's a major supporter of Florida Red and Blue, an organization that's also working to defeat the ballot initiative. We did ask a representative for Florida's Coalition to Protect Marriage to appear on our program. They did not respond to our request for an interview. John, thanks very much for coming.
Good to see you.
Why so much focus on Orlando for an effort like this? Why so much activity here?
Well, I think Orlando, of course, this is where I-4 runs right through. The I-4 corridor is known to political people all over the country as kind of the bellwether vein of Florida, and Florida is kind of the bellwether vein of national politics. So it usually ends up on I-4. Orlando sits in the middle of I-4, and I think that's the reason it's here. Plus, the guy from the group that's starting the petition, Stemberger or whatever his name is a local Orlando lawyer.
Okay, and you as well, being a visible leader in the community, why do you support this effort?
Why do I support it? Well, I support it for the main reason I support it when the people first came and talked to me is this. For the last 8 years, I think everybody will agree that the environment in Washington, D.C., the environment in a lot of state politics is toxic. There's hatred, there's a divide. People have a visceral dislike just because you're Republican or Democrat. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of that hatred has been fueled by this very type of amendment. That this amendment doesn't, gays cannot marry now in Florida, okay? Mm-hmm. You start with that. And so we want to have a constitutional amendment to ban something that's already banned. And what's really lying underneath all this is hatred and a politics of hate.
Well, and all this rallying may be for nothing at this time. There's not enough signatures. Do you anticipate it will appear on November's ballot?
I don't know. I mean, this crowd that's putting this together is, from the gang that couldn't shoot straight. I mean, these are people who I would tell them, go get a life, go get a real job. A lot of this is just for people to gin up these signatures, is to create a little job for them for a year to go out and so I think they may get the signatures. But where their problem may come is where the supervisor of elections are going to count them. Mm-hmm. And so what I anticipate, if I had to read the tea leaves, I think they may go out and get the signatures because that the people who were paid to get them, that didn't get them, are being told, hey, we paid you this money, you didn't get it, we want our money back. So they're probably frantically out there trying to get the signatures. The question is, will the supervisor of elections do anything about it, count them in such a short period of time? And then where it all could end up is where it always ends up, is in the courts, where they'll be suing the supervisors of elections to count the ballots.
Do you think this is an effort to get more Republicans to the polls on the day of election, even if it's a presidential election, whatever, to drive more numbers of Republicans there?
There's no question about it. It's but it's not going to work this time. The politics of hate. I mean, Karl Rove and that little guy that died of a brain cancer, Lee Atwater. These were just very vicious people who prey on the worst of people. You know, this gay bashing, gay hating. They prey on the worst in people's hearts, and they drive people who don't care about anything else will get up off the couch, make sure gays can't get. Can you imagine that? But they know it's worked, and it's worked for the last 20 years with this crowd, and they think it's going to work this time. I think they're wrong, because I think America and I think Florida has finally figured these people out.
John Morgan, we thank you very much for your time, sir. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
For continuing election coverage heading into Florida's January 29th primary and beyond, be sure to tune to your radio to 90.7 WMFE. Our extended coverage goes all the way through Morning Edition, All Things Considered, and Intersection. That's on your radio dial, 90.7 WMFE. That's our program for tonight. We'll see you again on January 31st, when we'll have a fresh look at Central Florida's nursing shortage and how a Seminole County organization is trying to solve that problem. We'll see you then. Missed an episode of This Week? Go to WMFE.org/thisweek and watch the entire series anytime, day or night. And while you're there, be sure to shoot us an email. Tell us what you think about the program. You can also sign up for our podcast, all the This Week you want, when you want it, at your fingertips.